And thank you to our previous speakers as well. That was really, really inspiring.
Yeah, very moving.
Yeah.
Very moving.
Wonderful. Well, as Christopher said, we're going to chat today about value cycles and hype cycles in the metaverse. And this is Jeff Wong, who is the Global Chief Innovation Officer at EY.
No?
I think these kind of, that's better. Okay, great. These kind of low-tech snags. Okay, wonderful. Jeff, before we get into kind of proper questions, can you just, so we're all on the same page, define how you're thinking about the metaverse? What's the metaverse mean to you? And then we're going to get into kind of business use cases and hype cycles and value cycles.
Yeah, no. First of all, Guy, thanks for having me up here. Just so people know, EY, 350,000 person professional services firm, every major country, pretty much every major city in the world. And there I get to create new things. So the way I like to think about the metaverse is I use a very broad, simple definition, particularly because we have a limited time up here, which for me is any 3D immersive experience. And I make a distinction between the metaverse and Web3, where you're talking about blockchain, DAOs, cryptocurrencies, things like that, which are highly related, but you can have one without the other. So I try to pull them apart and say, let's think about them in two separate definitions.
Okay, cool. Well, that's super useful. And so just working with that definition then, Jeff, I mean, one of the really interesting things about EY's perspective here is that the breadth of different kind of industries and clients that you have. And I wondered whether you could talk a bit about what kind of companies you think actually need to have a metaverse strategy. Because, I mean, what I suspect is the case is that there are lots of CEOs of non-tech companies out there who heard about the metaverse last year and they got very excited or worried or anxious, and they want to know whether they need a metaverse strategy. So I just wondered whether you could just kind of give us a bit of a taxonomy of which companies do, which companies don't need to worry about it for the next 5 years, you know.
Yeah, okay, you're right. It was funny. At the end of last year, we all know that there was a very famous name change. Might be here. There happened to be one of our clients, so I won't say the name. And what was really funny is right after that happened right before the winter holiday break. Right after we came back from the winter holidays, we got calls from CEOs, every country, every industry, every size, saying, I need you in the office next Tuesday, and you have to tell me what the metaverse is and how it applies to my business, and therefore what should I do about it. So in terms of the amount of interest that generated, in terms of the amount of discussions that generated, it really was this wild boost. I'd been at EY for a while. I run the global labs across AI, blockchain, metaverse, Web3, and quantum. I've never seen this type of hype and traction with our clients around the world, the immediacy of it, other than here. What we're actually seeing, so the title, hype curve versus value curve, what we're actually seeing is that every CEO around the world is thinking about it, should be thinking about it, but probably at different stages. The early traction in the metaverse really is around where I think people probably expect it. Luxury brands, consumer packaged goods, entertainment companies. Entertainment companies are really interesting here. You've seen some of the other examples of things where people are experimenting with it, and those experiments are great and wonderful and starting to gain traction, sort of mimic digital twins for your factory floor, things like that, which we have experiments like that, but I would call those more experiments, whereas the companies in the entertainment and luxury goods are actually spending significant sums of money, impacting their market cap, things like that.
That's interesting. And so in the areas where kind of significant investments are being made, I mean, what are the interesting kind of applications and way in which your clients are kind of using metaverse and related tech to to improve their kind of business outcomes?
Yeah, they're really looking at it as new lines of business, right? So not surprisingly, a lot of the luxury good companies, it's like, wait, I can sell my digital T-shirt or my digital shoes, and it's a wonderful line of business because those shoes don't cost me anything to make. and now I can sell a bunch of it. What was actually fascinating is they're selling NFTs for digital sneakers. We helped a major brand do that. I'm sure some of you are wearing their shoes today. And not just did they not just make money on that day. So it was a sneaker drop. They made significant sums of money per shoe and the thousands of dollars per pair of NFT on the pair of shoe, their market cap actually went up that day. And I think that's when, I think this is really the trigger for why these brands are so interested in it, is because they're starting to see that trigger point of, wow, the shareholders are paying attention to this thing happening, and my market cap moved up by way more than they made on the shoes, although they made a lot of money on the shoes. And I think that's really what's fascinating and interesting to them. The second thing I think is entertainment companies, and this is really fascinating because they have a lot of the content that people like. And so one thing's, I work with some of the largest entertainment companies in the world, and what's really fascinating is it starts with, can you build a metaverse version of my ride or of this venue that I have? And you're like, yeah, it's hard to do, but it's not that hard to do, really. So like, great, we can do that for you. And then they quickly get to like, so how are we going to get users to this thing? Okay, we can have all the people who are fans of it, they can come here. Okay, well, why would I do it in a different metaverse? Why can't they be citizens of my metaverse? I'm like, okay, that would have a lot of value. And then they get to the last question, which is, so can I launch my own cryptocurrency? Right? And that's really the magic of this, is it starts with something very simple, relatively simple and straightforward. Can you build a digital version of this? Tell me where I should build it. But it ends with this imagination of where it could head. So I find those use cases or those discussions to be really interesting.
That's really interesting. It's like a gateway technology.
It's a gateway technology.
So at what point do you say to your clients, no, don't launch your own cryptocurrency? That's a silly idea. The red metaverse ride is sensible, but you've gone way over the board. I mean, how do you think about kind of where companies should be drawing the line here?
So for me and for us, really, every technology goes through its hype curve, right? This wonderful promise of what it all is going to bring, and then sudden realization, actually, it might take some years to get there. And if you go back to even the internet, right, and everyone probably lived through the 99 crash, that's basically what happened. There's a bunch of things that happened in 99 or 98 that everyone said, oh, look, we can ship pet food around, and then it all crashed, right? And then now what happens, admittedly 20 years later, you ship pet food around, right? And this is the same curve with the metaverse, right? There's a lot of promise right now about what's possible. It's following this hype curve. But what we tell ourselves, how we invest, and then how we tell our folks, our clients to invest, is invest along that value curve, right? Where are you really making traction? Where are you really making money? Where are the users really coming and spending time with you? So in that example, it's great. The building the venue and inviting their users, probably great. Making a bunch of money off of different things you can sell them. Tickets to things. You can invite your big movie stars. They'll come. Those throw events. You can generate other types of revenue around the other properties that you own. That's wonderful. But unless you have a real way to make money around sort of this, let's get to the end state, cryptocurrency launch, right? Let's pause before we get there. Let's make sure there's real traction in your site with your citizens, your fans, before you start investing in sort of these broader and bigger concepts like launching your own cryptocurrency.
Sure. So Jeff, I mean, where do you think we are on the hype cycle now, right? If you had to kind of put a pin in the kind of I don't know what kind of distribution of it. Well, I mean, are we near the peak? Have we passed the peak? Because it comes back after a few years, right? Once everyone's kind of calmed down a bit, and then real world applications can be kind of used in a kind of more mass market way.
So I'll define that two different ways. One is if you look at the metaverse specifically against my definition, any 3D immersive environment, then you have to include all the game sites in there, right? And the games you're measuring, the monthly active is in hundreds of millions of users. Most of what you would call more pure play metaverses, pure community, you measure in hundreds of thousands, right? So when you look at the overall numbers, it's like, wow, this is amazing. But when you look specifically, you're saying the games are very, very well developed, lots of users, great business models, et cetera. Not just past its hype curve, but well into value creation. And if you look at the more pure play metaverses, it's a very, very good start. Right? I would be very proud to have built any of those sites and to have the traction, the early traction that they're having. But we're really at the early stages there, right? So I would say, as an overall, if you look at the numbers, right, great, that it fits the hype. If you look at that specific segment, you're saying, wow, there's a lot of promise here still, and it's still coming.
I see.
If I broaden that out to what we were talking, the definition Web3, I think you see that hype curve. Like you can see it in the value of the cryptocurrencies. You saw this massive, massive upswing and this sort of, I would say, big crash that came down to the valuations. And it's funny because, you know, the media, sorry, guy, the media likes to talk about it as this big thing. It's like, this is the same thing that's happened before, 99, 09. Like you could just go through history and say this is just part of it, right? And so for me, when you start talking more broadly about Web3 and cryptocurrencies more specifically, it's just at the appropriate part of that crash.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't know if the Web3 kind of boosters would have said that in
There's some
late
venture
December
capitalists
last
are
year,
licking
but
their wounds a little bit, yes. But they'll do okay over time.
Jeff, when do you think, so you talked about the kind of two real, big chunks of kind of metaverse usage, the kind of gamers and then I guess you have kind of more enterprise and
Community
focused use. I mean, at what point do you, and the gamers is a kind of the much bigger chunk of the pie at the moment.
Yeah.
When do you think that mix starts to change and the kind of gamers actually become, because of the growth of all the other applications?
So I think it's not particularly extraordinary, but you know that there's an age group that is very involved with these games. So call it to age 10 to 25. I mean, every survey has a slightly different age cutoffs, but I like to think about it as, from middle school up through right before you graduate college, maybe right after, right? And so they all have a certain type of profile, a certain type of thing that they like to do. They're spending so one study in one area of the world said they spend 7 times more time in a metaverse, these 3D immersive environments, than they do on traditional social media, right? So 7 times the time over there. So in essence, a lot of this promise that all these companies that are pouring money into space are waiting for is the idea that that group is going to age up. And when they age up, they're going to want to do more grown-up-y things like develop community, date people, things like that. And that's really what they're waiting for, because they're saying that age group, 10 to 25, they know how to live in this metaverse environment. They know what it means to buy digital goods and put it on. They know what that means to how they represent themselves, right? It might be a shield or a weapon or something for a game, but they know how it makes them feel to enter a community and represent themselves with some of that armor in that case, but as they grow up, brand, handbag, shoes, hat, right? So that's really, I think, what people are looking at as that promise. So I won't predict a specific time, but if that group ages up, and if that holds true, then you're looking at basically one generational shift up, and then a lot of the users will be therefore in the middle of their buying cycle, and a lot more money is going to come into the space.
That's really interesting. Okay, and Jeff, I think we've probably just got time for one more question. So I was going to ask, I mean, what do you think are the kind of current limitations of the metaverse technology that your kind of clients come up against today? Where do things need to be kind of significantly kind of improved before we can get to the kind of dreamland?
I wouldn't just say clients. I would say the user experience itself. And I think that this is not a surprise to probably this audience and this crowd. But let's do the most fun part, like the headsets. They're heavy. They're uncomfortable. They make me dizzy after having them on for 25, 30 minutes, right? And I have a lot of them in my office right now. I have a lot of them sitting there, a lot of different versions, a lot of different kinds. We've tried every kind from sort of the consumer grade ones to the $6,000 headset with the $15,000 liquid cooled computer behind it. It's pretty awesome, by the way. And so, I think what needs to happen, though, is this all needs to get better, faster, lighter, right? It has to be something that you're comfortable with. I see people with eyeglasses on, right? It has to be sort of as easy as putting that on. And they're working on it, right? They're working on all of that being a part of this. And when you do see that liquid-cooled computer running the high-end VR headset, you'll see the definitional accuracy that is possible. And so when you start putting these things together and saying, wow, admittedly, not everyone can afford a $20,000 setup. I can't, thank you, EY. But with that $20,000 setup, you can start to see the possibility of what's possible. With the VR lenses that come down, you can start to manipulate the world in front of you in a different way than before. And then with all the distribution of the consumer headsets, you can see how wide this can go. So when you put it all together, you can see that this is really something that could be magical and a difference maker in the world across a number of use cases. The speakers just before is probably one of the most powerful, emotionally connective for me, one to have, but really across industry. But it has to get there. You can't have people paying $20,000 to make it all work together. So to me, that's one of the biggest things that needs to happen is this money needs to come in, everything needs to get smaller, lighter, faster.
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating. Wonderful. Well, Jeff, thank you so much. That's been really, really interesting talking, and I'm going to see if I can expense a $20,000 headset.